Amriteshwarye Namaha. Good morning to everyone. Hi, I'm Divya, and I'm very excited to welcome a very special guest today on behalf of our Saukhyam family. Today, on World Environment Day, we are privileged to have the renowned film director, Miss Anjali Menon, with us. We are sharing a photo with our viewers from a couple of years ago when Anjali ji joined Amma, Mata Amritanandamayi Devi. Uh, Here we can see Anjali ji with Amma at the launch of Saukhyam pads in Mumbai. Anjali ji, we are delighted indeed to welcome you here once again.
Thank you, Divya. My pleasure entirely.
Anjali ji, you have shattered all stereotypes, and today you are celebrated as a very successful filmmaker. You are a wonderful role model for all young women and girls looking to make a mark in their chosen fields. Today, being World Environment Day, wanted to begin with your thoughts about the state of women and girls and the state of our planet today. Is that even something that we as ordinary individuals should be concerned about, the state of our planet?
Firstly, Divya, thank you very much for that hyper glowing introduction, totally undeserved. I think our perspective really needs to be that we are part of this planet, and as long as we are, of
Yes,
course, this is of concern to us. It's not us versus the planet, though we seem to be living that way. We
yes,
are very much part of this environment. We are just another being here. And unfortunately, I believe I'm not any kind of authority. And this is my observation, as somebody who's lived here for a few years. It's a situation where we seem to have gone into such a level of indifference that we no longer have any kind of what do you say, awareness about the space we are occupying in this planet.
right.
We don't really need that much space to occupy, but we have gone ahead and just literally conquered, taken over. But is that for the betterment? It doesn't seem like.
Right.
There are so many other beings here who are within their space, they're within their ecosystem. Every time they slip a little, outside it, there's so much havoc which is created.
Yes.
But we're the only ones who are sort of, left unfettered to go ahead and do what it is that we please. And just because we're sort of on top of the so-called intellectual pyramid,
Right.
that is, there is nobody else to correct us or to rein us in, rather.
Right.
And as a result, it seems like we're occupying way too much space. And what we have lived, for thousands of years, in the last few centuries, I think our consumption has increased to such a level that the consumption also takes up space. So in all those ways, we're leaving a lot of unnecessary baggage on the environment, and I think
Yes.
we're also paying the price now from what we can see
Yes.
with all of us all over the world when we're we're going through the present circumstances and we're suffering and we're wondering why us, but who else but us actually?
I couldn't
Because
agree with you more. Yes.
that kind of awareness, I think, for us, it needs to be at an everyday level. I can speak for myself. I was not terribly aware about a lot of things, and there are many
Right.
things which either people have been kind enough to bring to my notice or I've discovered along the way. And then, one looks back and thinks that, oh my God, I wish I'd known this earlier.
Yes.
And, that I could have made a difference, a little bit more of a difference. So I just hope that, in whatever way we sort of reduce the space we take,
Yes.
and if at all we take space, it should be in a positive way. we need to contribute in a good way. And right now, to keep up with all the negative, we have to do a whole lot of positive.
Absolutely. Yes,
It
it
feels like that.
feels like it definitely. Yes, thank you so much for these thought provoking comments. And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm definitely resonating with Anjali ji's comments. And I will share with our viewers two graphs. The first one is something we are all familiar with. Let me just pull up the graph here. So this is the first graph, something that we're all familiar with. What goes up must come down, especially during the recent second wave in India, where we were all waiting for the numbers of new positive cases to decrease. This is another graph that is similar with the same bell curve shape, but it has not got the attention it has deserved. The graph of our rising carbon dioxide emissions. For years and years now, we have heard how catastrophic climate change can become a real threat to our very existence. Nevertheless, this graph has continued its relentless upward climb. So many activist groups and organizations have called for our emissions to peak and then start coming down. But no, that did not happen. Not until 2020, anyways. Um, yes, the restrictions, the lockdown induced restrictions have finally led to a decline in greenhouse gas emissions. So that was one good thing. The question is, will we be able to sustain this downward trend? Would love to know your thoughts, Anjali ji.
See, there are a lot of efforts happening internationally. As recent as the last couple of months, there have been these roundtable conferences about decarbonization, 40 heads of state getting together to address all of that. These are things which are happening at a policy level, and that's wonderful. They should. And they are also great spaces for people who have the awareness and have the information to be able to see how things can be projected, and sometimes the future, how things should look at. Now,
Yes,
when we're looking at cutting down fossil fuels by 2050,
yes,
we're all very happy to read these things in the newspapers and know that, okay, there are these plans and everybody will work towards them. But I personally feel a much bigger change can happen when we do this at a practice level. When you and I, regular
yes,
people,
yes,
adopt these practices in
right,
our daily life.
yes,
And I wish that we had more awareness about what it is that we're doing,
so true.
because in everyday life, from the minute we wake up,
Yes,
the number of lights we are using, the air conditioning that we might be using, the vehicles we are using,
yes,
the utensils you're using,
right,
what you're packing your stuff in, every single thing actually offers us an opportunity for change.
right.
And that kind of change will come about only when we are really made aware about it.
Yes.
And I think when every single person makes that small change, it amounts to a really huge one.
Yes.
So while the governments and the bigger knowledge bodies are doing their thing, I think one very important aspect is to inform the regular people about what changes they can make. When we were children, I remember we used to be really happy every time we got a straw to drink something with.
Oh, yes. It was
You know,
exciting then.
it was a very exciting thing. It was such a small thing. But at that time, that generation was very fond of using straws, and every kid,
Right.
who was keen to have a straw would get, a straw if they were they had the privilege for it. But over years, we got to realize that this was actually a completely useless piece of plastic, which, for a very temporary, a pleasure, you're actually creating something which has much more damage, and that totally doesn't justify it. So
Right.
as we grew up, by the time we got into our teen years, we realized that this is not a good thing. So anybody who would, be using a straw, we tell them, no, 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 you shouldn't use it, and we
Right.
explain it. And that age when you feel like an evangelist and you want to change the world even with your little
Yeah.
straw. That, but I realized over time that people really sort of abandoned the use of it. Most people stopped using it, and that came from an awareness,
Right,
right? So
right,
that kind of change is what I'm really rooting for in
right,
our daily life.
right.
When we have that kind of change, I think I became far more aware about this once I became a mother.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know what it is. I've noticed a lot of people saying that as well. That
Wow.
it's when you become a mother that you really become aware that, oh yeah, you need to really think about slightly more of the future than just your immediate future. I
Yes,
think every time I mean, when I say mother, it does not have to be somebody you have birthed. It can be
right,
anybody
right.
you care for. I mean, once
Yes,
you're a caregiver to a younger person,
yeah,
then your whole idea about the future changes. It is not just your lifetime. You start thinking a little further ahead,
yeah.
and they have a way of gently edging you out of the center of your own universe. Taking up that space. So when that happened, that's the first time I sort of started thinking, what am I doing? Whatever I do now, I have to do consistently because I'm also teaching other people, the little ones in my family, that this is how it should be done. And whatever we teach them is what they're going to stick with.
Yes,
So then you get a lot more aware about the implications of your own actions, and you
yes,
want to try and do the right thing. Though there
yes,
is no complete right and no complete wrong, you
right.
still want to do what is good, what is sustainable. All of these were new words for me in my lexicon, and
Yes,
I think it's important. Frankly, I believe anybody sets up a new home, I think there are a few things people need to learn. There should be courses which teach them, so
yes,
that right from day one, you're doing something which is sustainable. You're doing something which is earth friendly, environment friendly, and once that's a lifestyle, it's just so much easier, to just adopt and to just go with it. That's
yeah,
so much easier. It's that big shift that happens,
right.
which is when you really have to really steer the wheel and move into a completely different direction. And for me,
Right.
that happened with bringing a child into the family.
Beautiful.
That was the time when I replaced all the plastic in my kitchen,
Wow.
and moved to to glass or steel and things like that. In
Yes,
cooking, you're more careful. You're concerned about how much plastic or waste you're generating. And you're careful about splitting it up. These small things, I think, it's just hugely important. And
yes,
fortunately, in India, I think across our country, but big part of us is rural. And a lot of the practices there, we already have a lot of solutions,
yes,
which are part of our environment and are environment friendly. And
yes.
so it's actually not such a big shift for us to simply identify those and find those and integrate those.
I agree.
Instead,
Yeah.
what we've sort of been doing is these how do we say, the ease of using certain things, like plastics, that simply has perpetrated into us, and we've allowed that to go all across the country, and now we're going the other way. We're going in the reverse direction, trying to
Yes,
find solutions for that. So I think
yes,
every time we adopt something new, and awareness of should this be adopted at all, I think that would be a great place to start, possibly. So
yes.
now when we have sanctions and when we have restrictions is when we are becoming more aware, and compliance also usually comes when there's a rule against it. Otherwise, otherwise everybody simply does what's easier. And
Right.
my perspective would be that just in the smallest ways, in one single day, what we can do differently
Yes,
to make things better. I think it goes a long way.
yes.
That becomes part of our culture, frankly.
Yes, so true. You've touched upon so many, I would say they're just so deep, these thoughts actually, because they're all interrelated, right? Like I completely resonate with what you said about it being a practice. So something that we can inculcate in our daily lives, and like the little things aren't the little things actually. So like, it's little things that really do make up the solutions. So, thank you so much for that really broad perspective and deep perspective. It was Yeah, very wholesome perspective. So I really agree with you. So thank you so much. And which brings me to many of your films have resonated with youngsters. The choices our youngsters make today will determine our future and that of our planet. So, Anjali ji, how can we inspire our younger generation to choose a lifestyle with a low carbon footprint?
Like I said, I'm no expert in these things, but
Yes.
I remember one piece of advice that I received from my son's teacher when he was in nursery school, and there were certain things which he's picking up, and I didn't know where they were coming from. These small habits,
Yeah.
and I just discussed with her, what could I do for him to do things differently, and she said anything that you would like to see a change in him, just change it in yourself. And it just really struck me because, if my son was being impatient, it's probably because he was seeing impatience in me and, taking up a certain pattern. So if he was doing something, he was not being orderly, it was probably because I wasn't being orderly. And very quietly, without giving out any advice or gyan or anything, I tried to go about changing a few things in the way I was doing it. And voila, there, it had this beautiful cascade effect, and she was so completely right. And I've since then actually taken that principle and tried to always apply it to different things. And I think we cannot see who is the younger generation. Is it somebody younger to me, or is it somebody younger to you, or is it somebody who's in school today? There will always be a younger generation. Nowadays, I think they say a generation is 4 years. So, two people who are just 4 years apart in age may actually have, a different understanding of how things are. So, this is a constantly evolving situation. But rather than inspire them, if we do it,
Right.
we change our actions and we live more wholesome lives
Right.
which have a lesser footprint, we adopt practices that are simply, more friendly to the earth, which are responsible practices.
Yes.
Then every time with people who are younger, I find they're so curious and they're so full of questions all the time. So every time you do something, you're going to be asked anyway, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that? That will always be asked. So that gives us an opportunity to say that this is the reason why I'm doing this.
Right.
And this is good for us in this particular way.
Right.
So that is one thing, but we should also be concerned about, rather than just inspiring the younger generations, how are we going to make up for all that we have done? How are
So
we going
true.
to undo that?
Yes.
I'm very concerned
I
about
know.
that.
I know. We've really left it upon, it's as if like we've just left it to the generations to come or something.
What
I
is the
know.
legacy that
I
we're giving
know.
them?
I
Is,
know.
is it frankly a lot of garbage? When you talk about the environmental space,
Right.
what are we handing over to them on a platter?
Right.
What is it that we are handing over to them which we did not receive?
Mm.
We did not receive so much trouble.
Yeah.
We have
Right.
done a lot of this as well.
Right. Right.
So I think it's up to us to undo as much as we can, to start off these undoing processes,
Yes.
and maybe then, you know, hand it over. Because otherwise, it's just not fair, is it? That we and our forefathers have done all kinds of things, and now you guys have to do all the right things.
Yes, no, I completely agree with you, and I understand that it's almost as if we're coming from a place of guilt, right? It's like you feel like how could we have let it get this far? But yeah, I absolutely agree with what you say, and I also think it's up to everyone at this point. I mean, like you were talking about there being awareness in everybody's actions, and as Amma speaks about Shraddha so often now. So just having that awareness in all of our actions, and just how you were talking about, like, you're questioning your own methods and your own actions. And I think to be introspective like that uh, definitely has a lot of weight over maybe saying inspiring youngsters, is what I got from what you were trying to say, is like to focus on oneself rather than having to worry about inspiring younger people. Just sort of do it yourself, right?
I think just that is the biggest shift, because rather
Right.
than, I think we need to move away from telling people what to do.
Yes.
Let's just do it,
Right.
and if it's inspiring, then they will be inspired. So
Right.
we don't have to do it just to for it's not something which needs to come from the outside. It needs to
Yeah.
come from within, that awareness, that understanding, because only then will it last. Anything that
Yes.
we share experientially. I'll give you a small example.
Yes.
I'm right now in my mother's home,
Okay.
and my son. We live in very urban Mumbai, and he's been unfortunately locked up in an apartment for a very long time, and now he's very thrilled to be here and to be outside and running around. And
Oh, wow.
when once he got here, we said let's do a little bit of planting, because we were all
Oh,
really
wow.
wanting to do stuff. And we found one place in this plot, and we put in seeds and watering and everything. But
Wow.
do you know what happened?
What?
Initially, it was very exciting because some of the things sprouted, and we thought we were going to have a good vegetable patch, and
Yes.
we did started having vegetables, but they were not good. They were not good. They were withering away. They were not strong, and we realized that there was something wrong with the soil.
Okay.
And that's when my mother remembered that that particular area had actually been filled. And we're not aware now what was the landfill used. You know, it just seems that that soil cannot really grow healthy things.
Oh, yeah.
So we shifted from that part of the plot to another, and now things are looking up, and they're
Ah.
growing in a nice, healthy way.
Yes.
And it just makes you realize how careful you have to be.
Yeah.
So that these things cannot change. Now, I cannot just change that soil overnight and just completely
Right.
just cure it.
Right.
So something has happened there which requires attention. So the next time we do things like that, we have to be careful not to repeat that. So for me, it's been a bigger lesson to teach my son that it's not that you just put a seed in and it will grow. You have
Right.
to make sure that soil is fertile, and this is an environment where things will grow rather than die. Or
Right.
rather, if you don't put it in a fertile space, then what
Yes.
comes out will be weak and withered.
Yes.
It's the same for us, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the environment in which we grow is crucial.
And
Yes.
the closer we are to nature,
Yes.
that which is not, it's not this perfectly sanitized environment. In
Yes.
fact, even with the lockdown and everything, it's a little scary because so many of us are actually now so petrified of touch, so petrified of going out, and that whole trust factor is just gone. When the minute somebody's outside, oh, it's about sanitizing everything.
I know.
But then there are we have this constant chat in our house about good germs and bad germs,
Yes.
and we need the good germs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in a real environment, this
Yes.
whole talk about rewilding, it's so important. And for us, it's just so important.
Yes.
In the lockdown period, what I really missed the most was just being able to be somewhere outside, somewhere green,
I know.
walk barefoot on the ground.
Very
It
important.
it was so important, and when you don't
Yes.
get it,
Yeah.
it's traumatic, frankly. So, there are so many people out there who are actually suffering through the lockdown at very different levels. And compared to all of that, this is nothing. But we need to be aware about all of these things so that when all this is over, we can move to a far more wholesome lifestyle.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are also recognizing that this rush to the urban life is perhaps not the best thing.
Yeah, it might be a little bit overrated. Maybe.
Yes. Yes, and that maybe we have options, and I think that
Yes,
also that has happened, that people have realized that we can work remote, and everybody who would always insist on a meeting,
I know.
realizes that they can actually, not have people travel in cars with
Right,
fuel burning and all that
right.
pollution.
I
You
know
can
there
simply
was this
sit
meme.
and have your meetings in your own spaces. You don't need to do this whole thing.
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that because when the pandemic struck, there was this meme circulating around, and it was like, this meeting could have been an email or something. Like we didn't have to really, get out of our and commute and all of these things, which is also adding up to the greenhouse gases and so yeah, actually stepping into this new form of reality has definitely been made me think in ways that I never thought of before. Like you were saying, it's like we're constantly learning about, like, what's good, what's better for ourselves, for our bodies, for the planet. So it is a constant learning experience. And yes, it's very beautiful, all that you just mentioned. So,
And the thing is, when for our that there are people among us who we have more access to resources, we have more access to solutions, we have more access to everything, frankly. But
yes,
our actions actually determine the experience of many more outside of us as well.
so true.
And people who may not have as much access as us are the
Yes.
worst hit,
Hmm.
because for all the consumption that happens in a certain section of society,
I
it's
know.
all of society that suffers.
Right.
The waste that we generate every day, the
Yes,
people who pick the waste, they are
exactly.
impacted by it. There are many more in that whole chain, that whole
Yes.
ecosystem, and it's really important that we grow awareness about that.
Yes, exactly. Anjali ji, speaking about the waste, now disposable sanitary napkins is something that a vast majority of us use during our monthly periods. I am someone personally who switched from organic disposable pads to reusable pads, understanding that disposable pads, organic or not, can never be sustainable. So this brings us back to our, idea of sustainability, and would love to know your thoughts about this.
See, is as a woman, from what I have read, the little bit that I have read, is that a single woman uses about 10,000 sanitary napkins in a lifetime. And these are not, things that can be reused, because I believe once human fluids are in contact with that kind of plastic, then it renders it sort of, useless, because it's
Yes,
not economically viable to process it and bring it to a stage where you can use it again.
right.
So then this is as good as your single-use plastics.
Absolutely.
And we're consistently using all of this, be it essential napkins, be it diapers, all of these things.
Yes,
So if we are aware about our plastic cups and our plastic plates and the straws, and we can live without them, then for me this is just an extension of that. If we are telling people don't use straws, but you're going to go back and use these, then it really isn't serving a purpose. And this
right.
is far more difficult because because of human fluids and things being part of that entire process.
Yeah,
It's very difficult to process these things. And who
right,
is doing it? We are not in a system where all this is done, without human intervention. No, this is a
right.
heavily labor intensive, high on human intervention space. And
Yes,
what can we do to change that? Because the amount of waste generated, when I realized this, I was really taken aback, because I had never thought about it. And to think that that basic level of awareness is not there,
hmm,
I felt ashamed,
yes,
because that's not done.
yes,
Typically when a young little girl, she first attains puberty, and she's entering this new lifestyle. It is at that stage itself that, she needs to be introduced to a sustainable culture.
Yes. Couldn't agree
Right
more.
from that stage. So that becomes part of her life because she's never known any different.
Yeah.
And she's doing something which is good for herself. And she's doing something which is good for her environment.
Yes.
And she's not generating that whole, there's a huge shrinking that happens of her carbon footprint.
Right.
And typically, like I said, a lot of people experience that the decisions that women take within a home, in a culture like India, there are a lot of things that a household decision at many levels about these things are left to be in a women's space.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a certain kind of responsibility that culture gives us.
Yeah.
I don't always say, I think, as always, these should be, equal spaces. But as we have it, until it evolves to that, we have a space where all of this is considered a woman's domain. But this also gives us the power to change that. It empowers us to do that, to bring that shift. I think that is important. When we have that opportunity, it is so, you know, vital that we
Yes.
make those changes now.
Yes.
Because otherwise, what happens is if you're going to be irresponsible about that and we're not going to see it as our duty in a way, to make the switch, then there is really no point in any government bringing up restrictions because then you're talking about a population that is simply uncooperative and uncaring. Then you cannot really dream of an environment which is better than what it is now. So all of this, like all good change, it needs to start with us.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we'd like to say that every woman and girl everywhere should have awareness of and access to reusable menstrual products. There are many types in the market today, for many different types of solutions now. There's menstrual cups, period panties, reusable pads of several brands. So find out which one might work for you, our viewers, and then make the switch. You will prevent the emission of over 200 kgs carbon dioxide equivalent with your choice. This will go a long way in enabling our planet to heal, in permanently bringing down that graph of carbon emissions. If you remember that last graph that I showed us, which was particularly speaking to the carbon emissions, so that's our goal, and we want to bring that down. So, Anjali ji, any parting words for our viewers, please?
Divya, I would also say that we shouldn't make a women's issue out of this. Because this
Yes,
is not just about women,
I agree
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
this awareness needs to go out to everybody.
yes,
Because I think this is something that these are choices. These this information has to reach everyone for this to become part of culture.
yes. I
And
couldn't
anybody who
agree
can
more.
contribute that. I have a colleague of mine who's actually launching period wellness packages, where
Okay,
you can buy it for your daughter.
so sweet.
So I
Yeah,
don't see only a mother being able to do that. I see a
I
father
know.
being able to buy that for his
Father,
daughter. You
brother,
know,
boyfriend, husband.
friend, husband, whoever, and women gifting each other these things
Of
as well.
course, yes,
Now, when
sisterhood.
we need to do that also into our culture.
Yes,
That's very important. There are certain aspects of tradition which are wonderful, but there are
yes,
also certain aspects of tradition which we need to review and see if they are outdated, and if they are, we need to grow new traditions.
yes,
I think that shift needs to be happening organically, and also it needs to be in keeping with the present day values as well. That
yes,
would help us make it really sustain. And, I'm looking forward to a future like that where we are more responsible, and I hope the next generation will see that we mean well, and they will not curse us for what
I
what
know.
we are handing over. I hope we're able to undo some of the
Yes,
damage that we've done. And all
yes,
such initiatives will really go a long way. So when we talk about reusable natural products. That goes a long way simply because it also affects the health of the user.
Yes.
And it's something that we all need to really carefully think about and adopt in the best way possible.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your, I mean, I would like to say radical, but at this day and age, maybe it shouldn't be termed radical, or I just think it's very progressive, everything that you touched upon. And I thank you so much for the thoughts that you shared with us today. And thank you for joining us this World Environment Day and for your inspiring
Pleasure, Divya.
words. Thank you so
Pleasure,
much.
my pleasure entirely. Thank you so much for these initiatives and looking forward to many more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We end this discussion today with a quote by Amma. When we live in harmony with Mother Nature, the song of life becomes sweet, Amma says. Here's hoping that we will all be able to make the changes we need to, that our lives will become more and more in harmony with our Mother Nature, that we will have the pleasure of experiencing the sweetness of the songs of our lives, as Amma says. Om Namah Shivaya.